All right. Well, welcome everybody to the Friday Morning Book Group. So glad to see you all and thank you for joining us. This is great. Today we are going to discuss The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali, and a wonderful short little book that really grabbed me, and I hope it grabbed many of you as well. I found Kamali's writing just really beautiful, transported me to the 20th century Iran, just a overview of the culture, the politics, the societal norms of the day, very much the behavioral expectations, and not least the cuisine. She goes into the food in such great detail. Her descriptions of the meals were just so exquisite. But even though at its heart, this is really a multi-generational love story with so much love and so much loss, there's so much more here to really discuss. Love, so much loss, memory, time passing, family, identity, and many discussion topics. I feel probably a lot more than we can do in 45 minutes, but so many important ideas. So cultural ignorance and bias, devastating losses, political, familial, cultural, identity, sibling relationships, cultural expectations of women in the 50s, today, Iran, here, Roya's relationship expectations with Walter and Bahman, and how that changes, and how does social class influence women's actions in Iran and here, back then and now. I mean, there's a lot to discuss, and the influence of family in choosing a life partner. How does that influence women now? How did it influence them back then in different parts of the world? How is it in the US? There's just so much, I felt so much here. So Kamali, whose parents are Iranian, she grew up in many countries. She grew up in Kenya, Germany, Turkey, Iran, and the US. And after she was married, she lived in Australia, Switzerland. She's lived in many, many countries. And she's surely, her writing is surely informed by her immigrant experience. I think this is just taken, the last thing I will say is just taken from the piece that I sent you that was published by the Boston Athenaeum, where she does belong, and she lives in the local area. And the last part of it was very touching, I felt. She hopes to tell universal stories of family and friends, lovingly crafted meals, fine art, and the creative impulse, and most importantly, the transformative power of empathy. So a lot to talk about, a lot of questions, a lot of topics. Let me make sure nobody's waiting. Nope. So I open it up to you. As always, feel free to raise your hand or just listen if you like to just listen. I open it up to you. Tanya.
I have to unmute myself. Okay.
Yeah.
I loved the book, and it was easy reading. But you said it practically everything that I was going to say, but I'll just reiterate that the ending was so touching that she brought back the whole life story with him, and the way he kept all the letters, that was so impressive. And I really, really enjoyed that book. It was easy reading. It was mostly love story, as we know, and also the revolution in Iran, which she described. And all the fact about her parents, how loving they were, and how much they wanted the girls to succeed. So all in all, I love the book.
Oh,
And
great.
that's all I can tell you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tanya. Appreciate it. Who else? Trisha.
I found it fascinating from kind of a transcultural point of view. It brought back to me memories of one of my husband's graduate student colleagues who was Iranian, who had fled Iran, was vehemently anti-Shah. And he was of the group of maybe 6 men, they were all men. He was the only unpartnered one, but I Googled him. I mean, he's now 80. And I found, first of all, that he married a woman who had been also an MIT grad student. And they went back to Iran. They tried to bring enriched education to the university in Tehran. And then when the Ayatollah came in and was anti-science and anti-intellectualism, they had to flee to Syria on horseback by night with 2 little children.
Oh, God.
And he then migrated. I'm not sure what his actual path was, but I think he's now teaching at McGill in Toronto, in Montreal.
Oh, wow.
And one of his sons is on the cutting edge of theoretical physics at the Princeton, whatever that study group is that is so esoteric. I mean, it's a fantastic immigrant story.
Oh.
And he always was kind of on the outs. And then also I had Iranian clients in California.
Oh, yeah.
Who had fled, and I have not been in touch with them, but I want to be in touch with them about this book. And there's also all that California stuff. UC Berkeley, where Walter went.
Yes.
Roya went to Mills. Mills is portrayed as having male students, which I don't think they have ever had. I think their constitution, like Wellesley, demands that they be all female.
Huh.
And it did not make complete sense to me that Roya and Walter would meet in a coffee shop on Telegraph Avenue, which is quite a distance from Mills College. So I thought, oh, but now I hear that was it in something you sent, Deborah, that there's a shop on Washington Street in West Newton called the Paper Mouse.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is thought to be the model for the Stationery Shop.
That's right.
In Massachusetts. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
But I really liked the book enormously. I've got a number of notes, but it brought back all kinds of other experiences for me.
Oh, good. Well,
and so I thank you.
Thank you for your insight. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Wonderful. Okay, who else would like to speak? Yeah.
Okay, I'll go next.
Okay.
Once again, this was a book that I never would have known about.
Yeah.
And I thank you for introducing me to it because it was wonderful. I agree with everything that has already been said. And, what you brought out about the book, it was easy to read. In some ways, it was almost like a fairy tale with the characters. I thought some of her character development was really interesting. I mean, Bauman's mother, was such a witch. And then, you come to find out later on, you know, how she had gotten pregnant as a 14-year-old and had an abortion and then had lost all these pregnancies. Not that it excused how she behaved,
Right.
but you know, there was a reason for it. And there was one quote in the book, and I probably should have marked it when I was reading it. And I think Bauman was the one who said it, or his friend. You know, maybe someday the people in the United States will know that the CIA were responsible for the Shah.
Yes.
And yeah, we do know that now.
We know that. And
Yeah.
yes.
Anyway, the one thing that was a little fantastical to me, that all these letters were forged. And I just can't, you know, when you're replicating someone's penmanship as opposed to doing calligraphy where there's an alphabet that you use, I just didn't see how they could have, you know, written a letter to him. It was in her handwriting, supposedly, and vice versa, that the letter that she got was written by someone else. That part of it, I just had a hard time grabbing, but it was a good story nevertheless.
Yeah, right. Oh, thank you. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'm glad it was a book you wouldn't ordinarily pick up.
I must say, when I was reading it, I was very suspicious of the letter that, I guess it was the one that she got, saying that he, you know, was going to marry somebody else.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Anne, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah. I loved the book. It sort of reminded me a little bit of reading, what is it? Reading something in Tehran. Reading
Lolita. Yeah.
Lolita, reading Lolita, the change of the government and how it affected her, you know.
Yeah.
She came to America and then she went back and just was teaching and just couldn't do it, so she came back again.
Right.
But the other thing, I loved it, but the fact that they ended up both in the Boston area is a little unreal.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, and of course the bookstore was going to tell her before he was shot, he was going to tell her that she was at the wrong place.
Right.
But
Mr. Fox,
you know, the ending was just so beautiful, them getting together, and she thinking that he had Alzheimer's.
I know.
I'm screaming, no, he doesn't.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
and all those letters, it was just beautiful. That was, even at 17, you sort of, usually a romance at 17 fizzles, but you kind of had the idea that wouldn't, if they had gotten together, it would have been a beautiful life.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was 17 when I met my husband.
Yeah.
I thought of that.
It does happen. Didn't happen to me.
Yeah. We didn't, well, then we took a break and then we.
Well, that's it. A lot of people take a break. My break was over. It was final.
Final break. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Anne. Thank you.
Yeah.
These are great. Richard.
Hey, your prediction was right that I would like the book. I did. It was an easy read. I read it and listened to it.
Oh, good.
Well, I figured, why not read it? Why not listen to it while I'm driving and read it when I'm home? So
Sure.
it was good both ways. The narrator was very good on CD.
Excellent.
And I actually dated a woman from Iran. Family moved from Iran, escaped when the Shah was, they had, after 1979. It was certainly a big cultural difference because she was a Jewish Orthodox Iranian. And she invited me one summer to go to her niece's bas mitzvah in London. And one time when we got together, her English was pretty good. So she treated me to there's a reason I'm telling this, a tour of London on a bus. And it was in English, so she thought I'd understand it. Well, believe it or not, this woman's English was such an accent, I felt like it was a foreign language.
Ah,
I could not understand a word she said, even though it was in English. So it's like a foreign language,
huh.
this bus tour in London. As far as the book, certainly the fact that it had Massachusetts landmarks and identity, that helped the book. And I think it was a nice surprise. Well, nice, but not for her, knowing that the surprise that, the miscommunication that, of where they were supposed to meet affected her whole life. But Walter turned out to be pretty good anyhow, even though her love was with Bachma. And I thought what was interesting, as I kept thinking of the stationery shop, which was more like a bookshop, I kept thinking of the loss and the challenges of keeping independent businesses or any type of bookstore, any stationery shop in business now, because everything is ordered online. I kept thinking of that.
Yeah.
I was actually at a store called sort of like the store, but it's different, but it's a store that sort of struggled to survive. The Paper Shop, anybody shop there?
One in Newton?
There's one in Waltham, there's one in the South Shore. It's a store that started with paper, but they sell everything else now, but they have filed for bankruptcy and they are still in business. So I sort of thought of the book when I was in that store last.
That's not the one that's in Wellesley, right?
Where in Wellesley is it?
It's like right next to the temporary library.
Oh, yeah, I think that is it.
Oh, that is?
Yeah,
Oh.
well, they filed for bankruptcy.
Oh,
Maybe
I
it's
get that.
Oh,
It might-
wow. That's a huge store.
Yeah.
it is, which, I mean, it doesn't mean that they are necessarily going to close. I think that location in Wellesley is doing pretty well.
Oh.
I think I think on the whole there, I think it's for the whole store. There's several of those stores in Massachusetts, and I have a friend that absolutely loves the store.
Yeah.
I actually got a birthday gift for her. I got a bracelet there.
There's also the paper store, which originally started in Maynard and has a store in Shoppers World. Is that the same? I don't think that's the same.
That's not the same. What's the
Yeah.
one in, they have slightly different names and I can't remember what they are.
I think it's the paper store in Framingham
Okay.
and Maynard.
Maybe I'm
And
saying
what's-
the wrong. Maybe I'm saying the wrong name.
I think it's the paper source, SOUR.
Yes, you're
You're
right.
right.
That's what it
Yeah.
is in Wellesley.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's different from the paper store.
It
So
is.
confusing.
The paper source is in bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, just as an aside, I looked up the Paper Mouse, which is the store in West Newton that the book
Right.
refers to. And their website is incredible. And it's like 5 minutes from where I live.
Yeah.
And
cool.
so it's on my to-do list to go visit that shop, the Paper Mouse, on Washington Street in Newton.
Just about
Check it out.
4 doors east of the cinema.
Correct.
Yeah.
That is absolutely correct.
Oh,
But here's the other thing. She walked from Newton Wellesley Hospital to Walnut Street. That's
She
a
got
heck of a long walk.
No, she got the Walnut Street wrong.
Yeah, she sure did.
Yeah, so it's not Walnut, it's Washington.
Yeah.
Washington, yeah.
'Cause she never could have walked that far.
She could have, but it's a long walk.
She was 77 and she was not in very good health from what I could
Yeah,
tell. But
yeah, that doesn't sound right. Yeah, that doesn't sound right. But we'll let her get away with that.
right.
I actually thought, oh, can I contact her for the book group? And I thought, oh, she's so famous. She's never gonna get in touch with us for our little group. But yeah, you never know. You never know.
No.
A couple other points I wanted to mention. It's not quite the same, but the Iranian Revolution sort of coincides a little bit, not totally, with what's happening in Afghanistan. In a way, the change.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a story in, I think it's yesterday's New York Times, about an Afghan refugee who got on a plane, got to Virginia, and then landed in, I don't know, Fremont, California, in the Bay Area. He and his wife are just walking around, with their eyes wide open, but they're sponsored by a Jewish group who are paying their rent. It's an incredible story. But the cultural shift.
The cultural,
Yeah.
yeah. All
so
that is similar.
enormous.
Yes, I agree.
So enormous. And I was looking at my atlas this morning. I mean, it's no surprise, but Afghanistan and Iran are absolutely side by side. There cannot be a significant cultural difference between Iranians and Afghanistanis.
Yeah.
The borders are just, there's also an article, an editorial in today's Times about the Taliban controlling the trade routes.
I'm sure.
That's what sent me to the atlas. Anyway, that's beside the point.
There's so much to talk about with what's
Yeah.
going on. I'm sorry that we don't have the time for that, but
Yeah.
there is. It's overwhelming. But Richard, did you have anything else?
I wanted to comment. I read an older, I believe took place in Iran, an older book which had to do with caste, which is, I think most people have read, The Kite Runner.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Kite Runner. Yeah, that's a good book too.
There was an article by him about him in the New York Times
Yes.
yesterday.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
it
Yes.
was interesting.
The author?
Yeah.
Khalid Hosseini.
Husani, yeah. In yesterday's Times, if you guys are interested, you can actually access that through the library. So thank you, Richard. So Pam, you wanted to speak.
Yes, I actually read this in 2019 when it came out, so I wasn't too fresh on it. I did see her speak at Authors on Stage at Wellesley College, and she is charming and very effervescent and really a cool person.
I'm jealous.
But I noticed that the article you sent was from 2013, and that her book didn't come out, which is, I mean, I think the reason it came from the Boston Athenaeum is because she was working there on this book. So it took her 6 years to get it out, 7 years. Or anyway, a couple of things. Talking about immigrants in the U.S., I read a review this morning so I could refresh my mind. And one thing it talked about was the immigrant experience. And I just wanted to read this from the book because I remember reading it a couple of years ago and was really impressed by it, about first-time immigrants coming to the United States. At first, Roya felt like a mime, hand motions and exaggerated shrugs making up for her lack of English words. All she lacked were painted tears. Being in a new country felt like being plunged into a darkened room. In the beginning, nothing was distinguishable. It was all blurry blobs at best, but eventually her eyes adjusted. I just love that.
Yeah, that's so universal, I think.
Yeah.
New immigrants, absolutely. And her sister, in the real life, her real sister made sure that you read the article, she learned English, and she really kept her on her toes when they came here. And,
right.
Yeah, it was interesting. But
I actually love the physical book. I just keep it on my shelf because it's so pretty.
Everybody says that. Yeah, they love the cover. It's just beautiful. It's just beautiful.
I also love the young romance in it, and that it's set in the bookshelf shop and the idea of exchanging these letters. I mean, that's just a piece of the book, but I just
Yeah.
was so charmed by that.
Well, yeah, I know. It's just it's got so much depth to it. I think
Yeah, so
to
much
talk
in it.
about. It really does. Yeah, for such a little skinny book. Joanna, do you have anything
Yep.
else?
Yep,
Yeah.
that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Joanna?
Yeah, no, I enjoy the book. It's interesting because my other book group also read it, which I find so many books out there, but so it was a while ago. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I like the idea that there's subplots within a book, and I found that there were several subplots. So not only was it a love story and educational, but there were just different with the parents and the status and the relationship and just the coincidence bothered me a little bit, just the idea that at the end that their children would bump into her, or one of their daughters would bump in, and they would trace back, but it makes for a nice story. This would be a good movie. I'd like to see this as a movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Joanna.
Yeah.
Let's see, anybody else who hasn't spoken? Kevin.
Hi. So it was a good book. I really enjoyed it. Like the main plot, I would say, would just be that that love endures decades later, which is really interesting. That they still have that spark, some 40 years later. I liked in the book on page 170 how Walter was described as a blonde version of Tintin. I used to like that comic. It's a French comic series. I'm sure everybody knows it, but I just like that kind of description of him. It was really good. Also, you mentioned about the food. It really is the most complex food. Turkish food, Armenian food. I know my mom spends days trying to make the food. You got to roll out the phyllo dough and put the certain spices in. And it's a big ordeal to make, Middle Eastern food. And it's even more complex than French food, I would say. And then on page 200, Lucille Ball was referenced in the Chocolate Factory. I like that. And then the last thing I have to say is that I was just a little disappointed about Walter and Roya's relationship because they only spent a very brief chapter on how they courted on just making the food together, the food, and I just thought it was really brief and just kind of unbelievable that they would marry. They didn't really lead anything up to just the cooking lesson, really, and that's all I have to say.
Yeah. I thank you very much, Kevin. I agree with you there. I felt like there was a chunk missing there, and there should have been a little bit more development to make it a little bit more believable. I agree with you.
Thanks.
So do you cook a lot of Middle Eastern food, Kevin?
I usually leave it to my mom. Like she'll make burek and dolma and of course stuffed grape leaves and all this interesting Armenian food.
Oh, is that your heritage?
Yeah, I'm a little bit Armenian, mostly Irish, but I read a joke online that said you'll work for days creating Armenian food and nobody will appreciate it, but they'll like it anyways. It's a funny joke. So it's just very complex food with all the spices. I enjoyed her description of the food in the book.
I used to cook Armenian food. We spent 2 years. Sorry.
Oh, you're breaking up.
I'm about a fifth of the way of the new book. Everybody's already had The Warmth of Mother Sun.
Yes.
So I'm liking this book. Hopefully I can get. I gotta get cracking on it.
Oh yeah. Yes, for next month, definitely. Anne?
I used to cook Armenian food. We lived in Watertown for a couple years, and my husband had an aunt who was Armenian, and we had grape leaves in our backyard. Which is
Watertown.
Joanna, could you mute yourself periodically? There's some kind of echo, and it seems to be coming from you.
I know. I don't know what's wrong.
No, I hear the echo is coming from Joanna because I see her box light up.
Oh, okay. Not me. I had an Afghan woman who lived with me for a while, and she was very interesting. She had been a doctor in Afghanistan. She had 7 brothers, I think, and a sister.
Oh, wow.
And she was educated in England. And when she came back to Afghanistan, her father was a Republican and had been jailed. And he said, leave, you get out of here. So she went to Germany and she married a German, and she didn't get along with him. So she and her daughter ran away to New York City.
Oh.
And when she lived with me, this is very interesting. She was tutoring a Chinese girl and I said, that poor kid is going to have a Afghan accent, because her accent was very heavy, and I couldn't believe she was tutoring, but
Wow.
she was interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, all great comments. So let's see, who has not spoken? Oh, Judy Wolf. Judy Wolf.
I agree with what you said. I thought it was a marvelous book, and it brought back so many memories of what happened and what is happening today. And I had forgotten until now, literally now, that we tried to help 2 Iranians, one whose father and one whose husband were locked up in prison, and they couldn't find out about them. And so they were hoping that people in the United States would protest and help them get out of there. But you know, we don't like to remember that we did put the Shah in office.
Yeah.
And we did help remove, is it Mossadegh?
Mossadegh, yeah.
Who was supported by the people.
That's right.
I think fiction story, which is wonderful to read.
Could you guys all mute yourselves except Judy Wolf? There's some kind of background noise. Thank you. Okay, Judy.
I think there's a lyrical love story in the family relationship story. And on the other level, there's a very serious political / cultural story. We really don't know about other countries.
Yeah.
And we really don't accept that fact or try to find out about them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's just a shame. And the British, who were there before us,
Right.
really know better. But this is such a rich, wonderful culture, and now torn. And I think the beauty of the book is it introduces us to an Iran, which is not the Iran of hostage taking, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And we, I think, forget that part of Iran. And just as an aside, on Beacon Hill, there used to be an Iranian restaurant. I don't know if it's still open. Their food is marvelous and delicate. And that's.
Yeah, well, that's one. I so appreciate your comments, because I think you're 100% right. We forget the culture, the people of so many of these countries that we have tried to go in and change and quote reform or take over, and it's very sad. The oil was the big thing back then.
Yes.
Mossadegh wanted to nationalize the oil, and that created a whole big stir, And it's very sad because that started the whole thing, and then the Shah, and then Mossadegh got out, they forced him out. It just goes on and on and on and on. And now, of course, the oil, the fossil fuel, this is destroying the world. This is Judy?
Just as an aside, and she never publicized it, and neither did her children. The person who helped us most, helped this family, was Ethel Kennedy. Somehow we made contact with her, and she really worked hard to try to help the family. Part of history that's not known.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of unknown stories of people doing good that don't come out. A lot of stories. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, Judy. They're important stories. Yeah. Thank you. Good. Anybody else? Anything else, Judy? Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else? I think just Irene, did you want to speak at all?
Well, I'm in the minority in that I didn't really like the book. I thought it was very light. I guess sometimes I approach a book and I'm looking for something that isn't there, and I was looking for a little bit more history, and this sort of struck me as a summer beach read. But listening to all of you, I can see, all of the reasons why you would like it, and it's sort of. I took so much of this complexity of it for granted. My parents went to Iran in the late 60s, because my father was a doctor and he had a lot of medical students and residents under him, and they came from different countries, and one of his students came from Iran, and so they visited, they were treated royally, and so it is a very complex, well-educated population at the time, and we presently only think of them as after Khomeini came in. And so that's, I wish there had been a little bit more history in it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, thank you for your insight. I mean, we all approach a book in a different way. I mean, it's interesting because I suggested it to my daughter, who called me yesterday as I was driving home from work, crying in tears. She couldn't stop crying. Mom, I just finished the book and I loved it so much, but I could not stop crying. It was the most emotional read that I've read. And she listened to it. I was so overwhelmed by it. And, so we're all in a different space in our lives. We all are different people, and, everybody is looking for different things. For her, it was, the losses were just so overwhelming. We all take different things. You're looking for history, and I felt like there was a good bit of history, but maybe not enough for you, but that's okay. That's why we have the group. We all have differing opinions, and I appreciate that, and I welcome that. So,
I cried.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
I did too at some points.
Oh, good. I'm happy.
I'm not a cold-hearted person.
I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, I mean, for many of us, these kinds of losses, I can say, are personal. So it's some of that was a very difficult read.
I remember her coming to working at MIT, and she was so educated, and all they would do is give her a secretarial job. Mm. And, that was so symbolic of the times. Yeah. First of all, this is only what women were going to be good for. And she was a foreign woman. So absolutely, she's lucky to have gotten this job. So it did reflect a lot of the injustice that was going on in the world in those days.
Yeah, I mean,
Because we're all overall injustice now, right?
yeah, it's not that much different now. You know, we have very educated people coming here who cannot, as you know, cannot use their academic degrees.
Yep.
Right.
So,
But my Afghan friend could not be a doctor without doing a residency, and she had a 3-year-old daughter. So, and she was she still is bitter about that because her brothers were able to do the residency because they had a wife taking care of the kids, and she did not have that.
absolutely, absolutely true. Yeah, yeah. Well, one more comment, one more thing, Richard.
When I think about this book, any immigrant story, doesn't have to be Iran, can be applicable, I think. And there was one run under my nose, which I'd like to share with the group. Is I have a friend, so obvious, but who lived in Vietnam, and he was forced out due to the lockdown now, and he's in Mexico now, waiting for his wife to come. And she can't leave because of her businesses right away. And she's not going to leave till she gets the shot. But there he is in flux right now in Mexico. He's trying to make the best of it.
Sure.
But the reason he had to leave was, even though he was married to her and he was American, he could not marry under their law because it's communist. So technically he's not married, and it would have been a big problem.
Sure.
And so he would have been considered a tourist, which he would have been forced out.
Sure. So complicated. Everybody has their struggle. Yeah, I wish him well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Never done Mexico.
Thank you, Richard. Any last comments before we wrap up? Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys. This was a great, another great meeting, and so great to see you all. So next month, September 17th, we will discuss The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. It is a big book. As Tom wrote to me, do we get an extension? No. But the audio, in case you're interested, the narrator is fabulous. If you want to listen, I am listening to it. And again, I will put in the Zoom code today, so you'll be able to access it after today. And just register. If you have any problems at all, just shoot me an email or call the reference desk. They can help you with it. Yeah, I'll probably send out some related information that you can read about her. That was the book she wrote before Caste. So Caste was the next book. And I'll see if I can find you some information about that, Judy, and send it off. And I do have several copies behind the reference desk at the temporary main. If you want to pick up a copy of the book or the audio, I have both. And just a little bit about the renovation. We are hoping at this point, hoping to open sometime the main library in hoping to open in October, sometime in October. We don't get delayed again. So hopefully that will happen. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys. Everybody be well. Enjoy the fall. I'll see you next month.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye. Take care.